hard to.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our program, Modern Investing on IBM TV, POT TV now. And I would like to introduce my incredible panel for today. We'll start with Professor Bill Danka, who published a book, Richer Than a Millionaire. Welcome to our show.
Great. Thank you, Sasha.
Great to have you. And then we have Nick Paliveda, founder of this network. Welcome to the show. And finally, our regular contributor, Peter, graduate from New York University and professional from Wall Street. Welcome to the show, Peter. How are you today?
Hi, Sasha. Good. How are you?
Great, very well. It's very interesting market these days. So hopefully we are getting out of this malaise that we were in the last 2 weeks. So the stocks are moving nicely higher today. I'm a little bit worried about tomorrow. There will be a report about the situation with employment report and so on. So I'm not so convinced that we are completely out of problems. But listen, that's where the market, that's what for. It's moving up, sometimes it's moving down, and with the right approach to the investment. And if you have number one rule, number 2 and 3 is the same thing. It's a preservation of capital. If you do the right things and you have the right your portfolio, which we are going to talk on this show, will do very well. I'm pretty much convinced about that. Peter, what's up with your investments these days? How are you doing?
Everything's good. You're right about preservation of capital, but the thing is, it's a very difficult investment environment. It's been easy for years because the Fed kept lowering interest rates, but now the Fed is between a rock and a hard place, and so is the investor. So this week, basically, now the 10 years at 1.9%, and it's rising, which is very expected. There's different predictions on how much the Fed's going to raise and how much inflation's going to be prevalent, and that is the biggest debate. But the problem with the Fed increasing is, first of all, this is why they're in a rock and a hard place. Is in 2018 they raised the 10-year to 2.8%. I'm sorry, to 2.5%, and the market fell 20% because obviously the market's valuating things based on the discount rate, which is based on interest rates. So the other side is in 2026, and this is the part that hardly anybody ever talks about. It's unbelievable. Is that the U.S. government is going into deficit on Medicare. And that means every year, instead of taking money in, it's going out. And that's going to increase the money supply tremendously. But I always have to mention other countries are in just as bad or worse shape, because not only have the other countries promised free hospitalization, the U.S. hasn't promised free total medical. And as a footnote to get to that, if you're a retiree, or you're planning on it, you better expect a lot more expense for medical, because it's a shared program for Part B and for the supplements. So those rates will go up as the demographics change. But going back to the problems is now all the money's going out, and the other countries, the problem is they promise free health hospitalization and free medical. So they're going to be printing even more money, and nobody's funded for any of this. And people have been talking about it for decades and nobody's done anything about it. So the problem is the Fed can only raise so much before they hurt the economy, which will hurt so many different ways. But the other side is there's inflation. Now, for inflation, this is from Barron's Roundtable, which is a week and a half ago. they said the consensus of the 10 investors on the roundtable, which met on January 10th, is inflation will rage and stocks will stumble in the first half of 22. And the thing is, I think they're right about the inflation will stay here for but much longer time. I'm not sure the market's going to react that way. I disagree with them on that maybe because the problem is where else do you put your money? Everybody has so much cash. We've all talked about this. You get into these large cash positions, like Nick has said, and I've been in this situation. Where do you put your money? So, but here's where the problem comes into play now. So the Fed can only do so much. But let's talk about inflation. Okay, let's concede that COVID is getting better, which it is hugely now. I mean, so many states, everybody knows this now. I'm barely reporting old news now because, but I've been saying this for weeks now. You could see the AMI, demographics are great. Hospitalizations are going down. It's going to go away, I think, in about 3 months or less. I've been saying that for a month now, because the history of this is that um, we're in the fourth wave, and that's usually the fourth wave, and AMI looks like a fourth wave virus. So let's say it goes away. Let's say the supply chain eventually clears up, and boy, it is not cleared up yet. It's actually, there's more ships waiting, last I looked, than that were waiting. But let's say that goes away in 6 months or a year. Here's the problems. One, rent is lagging indicator, and housing prices are 20 to 25%, and it's going to be 6 to 18 months till rents catch up, and that's going to go into the CPI. Two, the psychology, and three, what I've talked about for a year now, more than a year, is energy. So last week, and I'll get to the end of this in a second and let everybody else talk, but first of all, last week I talked about 10 reasons why energy is going through the roof. And the most important three, I guess, were one, underinvestment by the energy and production companies. USAC, one of my holdings, said on their conference call, said the E&P companies are putting in 40% less than they need to just to keep production where it is now, and it's already going up so much. Two, OPEC is not even meeting their quotas, and they have very limited capacity. And three, more and more of the energy companies' budgets are going towards decarbonization. And every dollar that goes into decarbonization is a dollar not spent on oil and natural gas, even though demand is going up. So the final part I'll say there, and then I'll let somebody else take over, is new news on this, just confirming what I've been saying about energy, which is probably going through the sun, through the roof, whatever. One, UBS joined other companies, Goldman, JP Morgan, and Morgan Stanley, saying that they're expecting now $100 oil. And $100 I'd be thrilled with. I think we could see 150. It could be even much higher in the next few years. Two, 7 companies, including GE, Marathon Oil, Shell, and U.S. Steel, formed an alliance that will work on decarbonization in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Ohio. But every dollar that's going to that, again, is not going into oil production, even though the demand is going up as we recover from COVID. And three, this is suspicious, Saudi Aramco is offering $50 billion in a new offering. And every time they do an offering, you go, well, do they need the money, or is it just that they think it's time to start selling their shares? Maybe they're, looking down the road and saying, we won't be able to produce forever, even at these levels. And so, that's suspicious too. So between all this stuff, I mean, energy, I'll conclude that part with saying, I think we're very likely in a 70s type scenario where we'll see energy driving inflation for maybe the next decade. And during that decade, inflation was going up 7% a year almost consistently. It happens to be 7% right now, and that's maybe not a coincidence. So it's a tough investing environment. You have to be very careful where you're putting your money.
Okay, Peter, very well presented. Now, the investor, having in mind preservation of capital goal, and all he can do, or she, in some cases, is right mix of your investments. And as we discussed before, the core of our portfolio has to be high-yielding dividend stocks. I don't mind even 90% of your investment is in high-yielding yielding dividend stocks, simply because historically these stocks always outperformed the market. So why do you think that that it will be something different in next couple of years. Bill, what's your experience with high yielding dividend stock? How it helps you to preserve the capital and have also sizable gains of your
Well, of course,
portfolio?
the performance over almost any period of time, 10 years, 40 years, 50 years, pretty much every study I've ever seen is that dividend stocks outperform other stocks. Growth dividend stocks outperform solid flat dividend stocks, and both perform stocks that don't pay a dividend. And in this environment, you want to have that cash flow coming in. The nice thing about dividend stocks is if you make a mistake, at least you keep the dividend, and it keeps the cash flow, especially if you have a diverse portfolio. So if one stock does badly, then the money comes in to replace that money. But I particularly like high paying energy dividend stocks, obviously, when you combine
Sure.
those two, because, then you're getting, I believe, the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Bill, what do you think about the ideas of preservation of capital and core of your portfolio being in high paying dividend stocks?
Yeah. No, I'm a believer in dividend stocks, but I'm one of those investors in AT&T that's going to see its dividend go from 7 point something to probably 3 point something. And so just because it has a high dividend and that was attractive when I got into it, I think there is some more stability in things like, Exxon. Isn't that something like a 4.5% yield right now on their dividend? And again, as long as energy prices keep increasing, I think the value of Exxon will keep on increasing.
Absolutely.
I hope, and hopefully that it will be a stable dividend. Now, look, one of my friends, she's a widow of a high-ranking GE executive, and when I saw her socially, I said, "Gee, how you doing? After the death of your husband?" She goes, "Well, I'll be okay as long as GE doesn't cut its dividends." Okay. And so I feel sorry for her, but I can imagine she was very concentrated in that one stock.
Yeah.
So I agree. Having a diverse portfolio of dividend-paying stocks and the energy is good. I think Verizon is good. I don't give investment advice, but what I do personally and what I've seen other friends that I've interviewed, for my research, they tend to be students of dividend-paying stocks, but around the 4 to 6% rate. But when we have inflation at 7+, you're still treading water.
Yeah, you have to be careful with those telephone stocks. I stayed away from AT&T a long time, and I wouldn't actually touch Verizon. I've looked at Verizon a long time, and that was always a bit more appealing than AT&T. But the problem is, first of all, T-Mobile, which is owned by a German company, but because they own a lot of spectrum, and also just what I see in the market, I see all the time, and I wonder about this, but I see more and more ads for, I saw it yesterday, one even more so. I think it was $25 unlimited data. So I go, it's more and more a homogeneous product. So because, and some of these companies are even like a cable company is saying they're using the other companies, networks now. So so then you say, well, if it's homogeneous and the prices there's so much price competition. So the only one I really liked is TELUS. I've done very well.
That's good. Yeah.
Canada has a sort of oligopoly between 3 companies. They used to be 4, then they went down to 3, and essentially, and the Canadian country, Canada's forever trying to increase the competition, but even then, I'm a little nervous about maybe competition coming in. But with T-Mobile, they own a lot of spectrum. This is the other thing, and so I always felt like, and they've done very well, that stock, but I don't own that either. But because of all the competition, but the spectrum makes me nervous, because if they have all the spectrum and Verizon and AT&T has to go buy the spectrum, then maybe and so the price wars make me nervous in telephones. And Exxon, I have to say, Exxon's okay. I looked at it, but there's many other companies I've advocated. Among the majors, I like Chevron more than Exxon. But that's the only one. I basically like the MLPs and the midstream, because they have such high dividends. We've discussed that, and I've got another one for you later in the show.
Nick, you've done quite well lately with your investments. So what is your areas where you prefer to invest?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Bill for coming on, but also reiterate the diversification issue.
Mhm.
In other words, because I've been advising people in the financial area from a legal perspective, because I'm not a financial advisor, for 37 years now, mainly working in the estate planning area, where you'd get a client that would come in. I'll never forget, he had 13 million in stocks. And I said, well, how you doing? Pretty good. MCI WorldCom has been great for me. I said, do you have anything else? Nope. I said, have you thought of diversification? Why would I? MCI WorldCom's great. He lost everything, by the way. And I had the same thing with another company called Enron. A guy had like 10 million of Enron stock. I said, have you heard the word diversification? Why would I do that? Enron's been great to me, and lost everything also. And they're all living on Social Security now. So from a practical perspective, and I can give you some other stories too, like level 3, it just goes on and on. You meet with clients and you talk to them about, especially when you talk about their estate planning, passing the assets to the next generation. And some of them come in what we call concentrated portfolios of stocks that made them very wealthy. However, somewhere in the years that they've been doing this, they never heard that word diversify, which is what Bill was bringing up. In other words, but you'll see that over and over again. If they got good advice, they would diversify. So with that, telecom stocks, we'll pick on those, man. I'm not a fan of the telecom stock area. I'm with you, Peter. Part of the reason it's like in my industry, we call it the race to the bottom. Once the industry is saturated, they can only compete on price, which cuts their profits. It is really tough. The only place I've seen telecom do well statistically is in Africa. Telecom is up about 11% per year, but they have their internal challenges of the infrastructure. So what happens, you run in a concentrated market, so I'm not in it. Energy stocks, you turned me on to this favorite, which I've talked to financial advisors. They don't even know this exists. Okay, but we'll put it up there because I think it's a great play. Unfortunately, right now it's trading real high. See, a problem, Peter, you give me good advice. I buy it, I make so much, and I'm going like, I don't want to buy more because I'm buying on the up. But I've talked to a lot of financial advisors that don't know about it. I look at it as basically your 9 to 10% checking account, which you can't get anywhere else. In my industry, which is pensions, we're squeezed because of the low interest rate environment. We're down to, like I said, 8 insurance companies will actually sell into pensions because they can't make any money. They have no spreads between their portfolio and having to pay out to the clients. So the fixed instrument area is really under a lot of pressure, which is one reason I think you're seeing a lot of cash go into the market. So I've stayed with your strategy, high yield dividend stocks. I got a stack of them here, and they've all done quite well. Only Antero Midstream Corp is down, but the thing is, I can't get rid of it. It's down very little, but it pays such a high dividend.
What company?
It's
Antero
Midstream.
Oh yeah, just hang on. I mean, I'm 2/3%, there, and it's
really okay. Yeah,
it's the same as always. It's just undervalued. Like they all are. I think the whole midstream sector is undervalued.
The midstream.
And Goldman recently said that.
The sad part though, Peter, it's not a sexy investment. MPLX and Antero Midstream.
Paying 8 or 9. What's the dividend on 8 or 9%?
I know. I totally agree with you. I think because it's not a sexy investment, the people who created it give these nice returns, and it's like printing money. So,
but wait a sec. If you invested 90% of your portfolio in this not sexy investments, you have 10% sexy investment.
I know that.
Some stocks like PayPal, which was a month and a half ago, $256, and today for $121, I'm not even sure if I want to touch it. Maybe I'll buy today for $121. I will sell tomorrow for $122. I'm not comfortable to hold on to stocks like PayPal. I'm comfortable with very few high-tech stocks. It's Apple,
because they're price earnings ratios.
3, maybe 4 stocks.
I'm looking at NVIDIA now, and I'm also looking at Exxon. Right
I want to talk about Amazon. Can I talk about Amazon?
Yeah, if you could.
Amazon
this is my favorite tech stock. I picked if you looked at the top ones, I was in Google, Microsoft, and Amazon last year, and those were like 3 of the 5 best. And Nvidia, by the way, thanks to Sasha. So
Media,
I
yes.
had almost all the top performers basically, except for Amazon. I take it back. Amazon wasn't, but I think it's the most undervalued stock. So I talked about it last week, but there's 2 pieces of news that I want to add to it. So the reason I talked about it briefly is they make 40% of internet sales. And if there's inflation, by the
Through
way,
AWS.
right, it's not going to affect this. And it's growing. AWS is the leader in cloud technology, and both are growing tremendously. According to the Ameritrade, their revenues have been growing 28% a year annualized for the last 5 years, and their
Incredible.
profits, EPS, 67% a year annualized. But the 2 pieces of news, and the one is really interesting, but one is just they had a great quarter. The market thought, oh, it's going to be down, and it jumped, I don't know how many percent, 10, 15% back to where it'd been, but if you look at the analysts, I keep seeing targets of, and targets are a variable term, by the way. Nobody explains what that means if you look at the market. Some people say, oh, it means 6 months or a year, whatever. Nobody wants to explain the length of time to sort of get pegged down there. But a lot of the targets I see are 4,100, 4,300. I have put at 4,500. I sold, and then I protected it a bit, but much, much lower for June 23. But here's the other news besides the good report. So Amazon, in the last decade or ever, I guess, has only done 5 buybacks of their stock, and they just announced one of them now. So if you look at, this is a study I have, and it shows the performance of Amazon after the last 5 buybacks. So the 12-month return after of these 5 buybacks announcements, the last 5 times, was 100% average for 1 year. 100% return. The lowest was 24%. The highest was 181%. So either Amazon doesn't have a place to put the money, but more likely they just think it's a good time to buy their stock and it's undervalued. The 24-month performance averaged 136%, and the high was 268%, and the low was 62%. So this looks like a pretty good bet to me, because that's just really good news on top of my belief in Amazon, because they are putting their money where they're, in terms of, they think that that's a good place to put their money now rather than investing anything else. So I love
Peter, I have a question to you. One of my position is BTI. It's British American Tobacco, and it's antisocial stock. It's selling horrible cigarettes all around the world. And believe it or not, but in Europe, in Asia, people smoke like crazy still. There are not a lot of anti-smoking laws yet, and so on. And they're doing a fantastic job, and they're paying 8% dividends or so on. Now, but it's antisocial, and I understand all that. Amazon, it may have a stigma of a company that puts out of business mom and pop shops, and there is a big upheaval in United States that Amazon is evil of evils, putting a little guy out of business, or so on. Now, what's the remedy here? I really don't understand this problem. It's I do sometimes I sell options on Amazon, and I never own stock of Amazon, and the stigma is that on one hand, yes, they're bad, they're putting mom and pops shops out of business. On the other hand, they are highly efficient, and therefore, who needs mom and pop shops who are selling inferior products at very high prices and so on? So nobody does that. How to deal really with this problem?
I can answer that.
Okay.
First of all, I don't know the exact statistics, but a very large percentage of Amazon's business is done through small shops. So, there is some criticism of Amazon because they come up with their own products sometimes, and then they compete against the small shops, but that's in a very limited selection of products. If Amazon was not in business, a gigantic amount of small businesses would be out of business. Gigantic, a huge amount of the business. I buy from Amazon all the time, and it's generally small businesses, that I've never heard of that do it. So, Amazon has been great for small businesses. Look, if I'm going into a small business now the opportunity is so much greater, which was why so many people have gone into small business, because now I can advertise through Google, I can advertise through Amazon. Before, how would I get my small business product out? Go to Walmart and beg them to, stock the product, and you'd have to go to a show and there'd be a million vendors and you say, please sell my product, and for how long? Now you have got your own advertising channel. So Amazon's fabulous for small businesses. Again, there's some criticism, but you know what? I don't think it's going to go anywhere at all, because they put out statistics and it's very strong in favor.
Peter, I would think it's just at least just as big threat to small businesses, and probably bigger than Walmart, is Costco. I've looked at Costco, and sometimes I buy Costco stocks or in selling options. On Costco, they have a fabulous quality products at very, very inexpensive prices. Plus, they have membership fees that they're making a lot of profits just from selling membership fees. They don't even have to make any profits on the product what they're selling, which they still do profit on those.
But that should be a safe stock in an inflation environment. But I always do. I mentioned this before on the show. RHS is the one I do, because they have Costco in there, and they have cigarette companies, which I don't want to invest in individually. But what I like about RHS, the Invesco fund, is they just about 33 different consumer staples. And as I pointed out on the show before, consumer staples do well. They're one of the best to have. I won't go into these numbers, but they're one of the best to have outside of energy in an inflationary environment. They can keep up and they do better on average than inflation. So Costco, tobacco, food, this is a safe place to put some money, in addition to energy. I am curious, Bill, what your book is about, because we never covered that, and I'd like to hear what your book is about.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, going back to the 1996 book, The Millionaire Next Door, which you see back there on my shelf. Okay. I was a student of Tom Stanley's, the lead author. He's no longer with us. He died about 8 years ago. But it was just a serendipitous event. It was just an ordinary marketing class that I was in, one of 40 classes I took as an undergraduate. And he was a young assistant professor, and he invited me to participate in his very first study of the affluent market. And it's been wonderful. So 20 years of research from 1973 to 1993, we had collected a number of empirical studies that we did for academic research and a few consulting studies. And we decided to get back together after, we both had our careers going on separately, to deal with this book that was tentatively titled Big Hat, No Cattle. It's about the people who have the illusion of wealth as opposed to a real substance, and who really does have the real high net worth. And so that's the basic premise of the book, investigating wealth formation. And as it turns out, there's a lot of ordinary people who do extraordinary things because they have this idea of this discipline of postponed gratification. And they're building a business, a plumbing business, a carpentry business, a car business, all sorts of, sure, surgeons can make money as well, and architects as well. But there's a lot of blue collar millionaires that are just doing it because, one, they're good at what they do, and two, they don't have to put up with any social prestige concepts and keeping up with the Joneses. And so that's how the wealth has been developed with so many of these first generation millionaires. In fact, we discovered in survey after survey that the affluent in America are 80% are first generation affluent. It's very few have actually inherited their money, and those who have inherited, there's another interesting concept. When we look at the spending habits of those who earned it versus those who had the money given to them, the spending habits are dramatically different in terms of all the consumption areas. So it's about building wealth. It's about earning, saving, investing, and looking at the long-term horizon and not worrying about societal pressures of trying to conform to somebody else's expectations, doing things on your own terms. That's what the book is all about.
You mean in terms of spending? Like, in other words, I don't need to own a Mercedes necessarily to impress somebody. I'm better off,
Or
not
owning
spending
just a
money.
car and
Yeah.
put the rest of the money in MPLX.
Right,
Yeah, right.
exactly. Or something else.
I used to be a sinner. I used to own a Mercedes,
Oh, did you?
and and I still wear my Rolex, but I got that in 1993 on the Bahnhofstrasse in Zurich when I was
Okay,
doing
well,
a
it's
seminar.
appreciated, so probably you probably made money on that.
So yeah, I do have some of my sinning tendencies, but that was back in '93. I've
Okay.
repented since then. But no, it's yeah. What happens is, and when I talk to my friends in law enforcement, when they say the way that you avoid mayhem is by keeping a low profile,
Oh,
and we have a lot of have-nots in society who want what the haves have,
mm,
unfortunately. And so, why subject yourself to some sort of mischief when you can live comfortably and not having to worry about getting your Mercedes scratched in the supermarket parking lot?
right.
There's a lot of simple things here. Now, look, we're talking about ordinary millionaires, those with less than $10 million. Once you get into the stratosphere, the ultra high net worth, 35 million and above, many of these principles just don't matter as much
Right.
about being frugal.
Right.
But here's the thing, in the second book, which came out in 2017, The Richer Than a Millionaire, it's not about money at all. It's about what is the path to true prosperity. It's about, meeting your own needs and your family's needs, but knowing that you can have a greater impact by being charitable. And I think we demonstrate with the psychological construct of subjective well-being created by a Professor Ed Diener, a psychologist and sociologist, that those who score high on that particular measure also tend to be those who are very willing to part with their time in terms of volunteer work and also in terms of their charity. And I think Buffett has something when he talks about this, giving away the bulk of your net worth, because there's a lot of philosophical literature that suggests those who die with a huge estate really are the failures of society. You'd think you're doing something great by having all this money, but what good has it done if it hasn't helped the greater good? So you help
Right.
yourself.
What you're saying is, interestingly, a few points you just brought out. One is capitalism. I've seen studies like this before about, the shifts in generations. You're saying 80%, I think you said, of the millionaires who created this, in a generation.
First generation.
And I've also heard that a lot of millionaires and very rich people, their kids lose the money within a generation or two. Even the Rockefellers, I once had a health insurance client who was a Rockefeller, and the family had been dissipated between spreading it out and a lot of the wealth, although they still have wealth. But the thing is, if there's this generational movement, then being a country of opportunity, equal opportunity is important, not just saying everybody has to be equal, which is basically socialism.
Exactly.
And
we want to have the chance to succeed, not guarantee an outcome. And but you're absolutely right about this intergenerational transfer. In the United States, my grandparents, one set came from Lithuania and the other from Poland around 1910. They spoke no English. They were farmers and coal miners. And my parents were born in this country, in the United States, where I know we're broadcasting internationally here. But my point is, my mother, especially, because my dad died when I was very young, said, Bill, stay in school. That's the way to succeed.
Oh, absolutely.
And she was a high school graduate. My father finished 10th grade. But the point is, they set the stage saying that the way to success is to know something, get educated, apply yourself, and then the rest is a miracle, and how you have an environment that allows this kind of nurturing.
Yeah, I think that's true if you're educated in certain areas. But today, everybody's getting educated in certain areas like liberal arts, and you go, okay, now I'm getting a job in Burger King, which I could have had anyway.
We
do have discussions on
we
that.
have a whole nother discussion on the value of college and
you need a specialized
education
in areas where there's demand, and there's plenty of demand in a lot of specialized areas. But we never did get to some of the other things we usually cover. But this bill has added a lot of information. But I think we're going to have to watch the time, in terms of Sasha. So
one very important thing I would like to add something from a great Russian writer and philosopher, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, for whom investing was really a foreign thing. But his look at life was very interesting. In one of his books, he writes, for average Russian person, do not listen to all the propagandists and everything what they're saying. Make life better for yourself and your family. If you're able to do that, and your neighbors will do the same thing, life of all people will become so much better and so much comfortable and so on. So that's interesting that it's coming from a person as Solzhenitsyn, and that's not something about investing. It's a philosophy of life. Make better life for yourself and your family. And if your neighbors will do the same thing, life of all community will become so much better.
Right. No, exactly. And this internal happiness and life satisfaction by giving it away, there's, we empirically demonstrate that's true. It's because you're not going to take it with you, guys, right?
Yeah, and we also want to help other people, because I told Sasha about this very poor statistic in the United States. 50% of Americans don't have $1,000 to invest. And I said, well, Sasha, your show, half the people in our country won't watch it because they only have $1,000. And somewhere along the line, we need to get them thinking about acquiring their first $1,000 rather than their $1,000 cell phone, which, by the way, can't go for $1,000 today. You see what I mean? In other words, buy Apple stock, not the Apple cell phone. And buy
that raises an issue to me, which is, why is the U.S. spending so much money overseas? Why is charity going overseas when so many Americans are hurting? And I'm not saying that other people in other countries don't deserve it or don't deserve help, but charity begins at home. And to me, it's like, I think that there's so many problems in America now, and the debt is going to hurt these people even more. Once inflation is a tax, and it's going to hurt investors, then it's going to hurt the middle class, it's going to hurt poor people, and then you have to ship money overseas, whether defending other countries, although we should do some of that, or charity overseas. Keep the money at home is my philosophy.
Peter, but it's a very dangerous area where we are talking about. Look, if in a country of opportunity such as US, second to none, half of the population don't have access to $1,000, it's a very scary thing.
And the media doesn't bring this out, Sasha. In other words, they keep talking about all sorts of stuff, from critical race theory to wars in Ukraine. But then you got to imagine, if you go down the street, you see 100 people, 50 of them don't have $1,000 in cash. So they can never come to your show. If they do, they go, boy, this sounds very interesting, but I don't have $25 in my checking account, or something crazy like that. And this to me is a big disease, a big problem that we have from financial literacy on. Somewhere along the line, we need to correct this. And this should be a priority.
You hit it absolutely right. It's financial literacy. I think this is the most important area, and that's what can lift people, even those who don't have today $1,000. Maybe if they would have a proper financial education and financial literacy, if you will, maybe that would get them out of this horrible situation.
And what's exacerbating this? You look at the employment. The workforce, what is that called? The percent of the population of working age that is actually in the labor force. The labor force participation rate.
Force participation rate.
Right. It's been in the 60% rate I mean, there's a lot of able-bodied people who have the disincentive to work because
Yeah.
we have a social welfare system that makes it comfortable. Saying,
Right.
let's give them more subsidies to stay home and not work.
Yeah.
And I want to mention something else. Sometimes it's not even people's fault. If you will take a social construct of the society, if you will take back, say, 30 years ago, around when Soviet Union ceased to exist, if you take two countries, one is Ukraine, another one is Poland. I know both countries because I was born in Ukraine, and I know Poland very well because in the 90s and the early 2000s, I had business in Poland, and I have a partner, and I sold my share to him in 2011. It's very, very interesting situation because normally when partners, one selling shares to another, they're becoming enemies and so on. We are very close friends, and sometimes I'm traveling, I'm getting to Poland, and we have a great time there. And sometimes he's coming to Canada with his wife. This year he's coming, by the way. And Ukraine, 30 years ago, was much richer country, bigger, well-to-do country compared to Poland. Poland was very poor 30 years ago. And because of different system, Poland is miles ahead of Ukraine today. It's actually the level of life is really approaching
Because they
the
went capitalist,
Western
right?
Europe.
Right.
Because
Absolutely.
they were
They
capitalist.
I
have,
wouldn't call it capitalism. I call it incentive-based compensation.
The same thing.
well, they had difficult time in the early 90s. They had shock therapy where people were really struggling. People were sometimes just hungry. They didn't have even food to buy. But slowly they started to build. There is very little corruption in Poland today, and they slowly started to build from the bottom up. They are very well-to-do today country. And Ukraine, where is Ukraine today? There is a huge corruption there. They have many, many problems, and now with the Russian threat, it's even exacerbated. But hopefully, Ukraine, I watched some of their talk shows. I think they will get out of it, but it will take some time for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. In the meantime, as we know, our America has its own problem that's not being addressed. Every time I see that statistic, I just shake my head. I'm going, well, whatever we're saying is not being listened to. And when you're talking about financial literacy, we started off 5 years ago putting financial literacy programs together for PBS, and they didn't want them. They didn't want financial literacy. Okay, do you know? And here's the reason why. The average contributor to a PBS viewer is a 69-year-old female who wants to watch Downton Abbey. They don't want to watch anything with financial literacy. So PBS isn't interested, and that's just the realities of life. So
that's funny. My wife loves Downton Abbey, and she doesn't like
what?
People 69 years old, people probably don't need financial literacy because
I know that.
they already have it, or they don't need it anyway.
Well, and then you add all this up, and then you say, what about inflation now? What if inflation now is around for 7% on these people and on retirees and everything for the next 10 years, which could be very easily, or 5 years, or even longer than 10 years. This is going to have a big impact on the social fabric. I'll throw in, because time is really, we're a bit over our usual, but I'm just going to mention one, a dividend stock, because we like to throw those in, but I'm not going to go into the details. But I only did 0.25% on this one, but it's Hess Midstream, and it's it's another midstream, because as Goldman said, the midstream is going to be on fire, something like that, and energy is the place to be. It's paying a nice dividend, nice cash flow, but maybe I'll go into more depth there. I only put 0.25% in because, again, I like MPLX better, Chevron 1%, EPD I up to 1%, USAC, all solid companies, mostly midstream. So very good.
Is there any particular tax implications of having these master limited partnerships?
Problems? Well, that's a separate show, really. But yeah, owning an MLP has all kind of implications. First of all, if you own it in an IRA, you have to be careful because there's a UBTI tax, which is unrelated. So in other words, let's say your midstream energy company owns 7-Elevens. I'm just picking this, and they make money outside that. Then there's a tax if you have too much income there. and you can get hit on that for the IRS. But in terms of owning it, really, it's all mainly advantages if you own it outside of a ML, outside of an IRA. The only disadvantage is it raises your accounting costs. So you could get a pretty big bill. So I hold the smaller ones like HESM and I'll just say that one in my IRA, so I avoid the accounting costs and I don't run up too much, UBTI. But the advantage is, one, you get huge amounts of depreciation and depletion. Secondly, once beyond that, return of capital. So you don't actually pay taxes. So let's say you have an MPLX paying almost 9% now. You get all that 9% back and a lot more because of depreciation and depletion before you pay a penny in taxes. And then after that, it's capital gains. So, but the MLPs I've owned so far keep going more and more negative because of depreciation and depletion. And it's longer and longer till I ever pay taxes. So they're great. They've been fabulous in terms of taxes. But again, if you own a lot, you could raise your accounting fees. So,
okay, and I have one recommendation. You'll be surprised, but it's an old NVIDIA. It's
NVIDIA.
Today,
got it. It's on my list to acquire
it's
now.
up today about 5.5%.
So
if you today, hold on, but it's only $260 some dollars. It was $360 about just 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So if today I'm going to sell $300 put, about I'm looking at April, maybe June. The premium there is incredible. You can't even imagine what premium you will get for that. And I don't see any reason why NVIDIA will not come back to 300 plus plus level. If you want to be more conservative, sell 375, 275 puts. You will get less premium then, but then you're see the problem with NVIDIA is, yes, I'm sometimes selling puts and it goes way higher than even the price, and I keep my premium, but I'm not participating in the further upside of the stock. So that's why I'm selling deep puts like 300, for example, or another idea, just simply buy stock and sell covered calls against that. Even if you will sell outside, much out of the money calls, you will still get enormous premium. And it's about just as safe. If the stock is NVIDIA, maybe it's just as good as selling put. So look at the NVIDIA, and hopefully one way or another you'll make money. Either you buy stock and selling covered calls, or you buy put, or you sell put and get the stock at some price. The only problem is that it will go higher than $300. You will not longer participate in that, but you will make so much money in premium that
you don't care.
You don't need it. You don't care anyway.
It's free money.
Okay, that's about it. The end of our program for today. I thank you so much, all contributors to today's program, Bill Danka, Nick Polivida, Peter Bennett. Thank you so much for today's program. And I hope to see you next Wednesday. Have a great and profitable week. Bye-bye.